All right. Well, I guess we can get started and more people can come in. Well, it's really exciting to see a lot of people this morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ochene, and I'm the Executive Director of Village Earth. And we are here to talk about the Native Lands Advocacy Project, a project of Village Earth, but more specifically, the data dashboard that we produced on the data from the Census of Agriculture for Native American Indian reservations. So basically, we're going to just go for a round of introduction and then go right in. So I'm going to pass it on to our amazing staff here, Maureen and Emma. So Maureen, if you can maybe start by introducing yourself and pass it to Emma.
Theo Nigod. My name is Marin Morfitt. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and I am the writer-researcher for Native Lands Advocacy Project. And I'm very excited to be with you all today. And I can pass to Emma.
Thank you guys. Dillahan, hello. My name is Emma Shear. I'm a citizen of the Tolowa-Dani Nation in northwestern California. I'm currently located in Missouri, though, and I'm the communications director of the Native Lands Advocacy Project. We're really excited to have you all here today. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to share this data with you. A few housekeeping notes just right off the bat. We are recording this, so we already got a question about that. Thank you for asking. We are recording this webinar, so we'll be sharing a link to that maybe today, sometime within the next few days for sure. So if you have to leave early, or maybe you'd like to share this with someone who's unable to be here, that'll be a resource available to you. We also will be doing a time for Q&As at the end. So if you have a question at any time, please feel free to drop that right in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to address them all at the end. Depending on time, but we'll also have our contact info on the last slide. So if you have a question that's more involved, or maybe that you don't want to ask publicly, we really encourage you to just reach out to us. We'd love to help you, meet with you. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get right into it. If you want to go to the next slide, Marin. So a little bit of background on who we are. So the Native Lands Advocacy Project is a project of Village Earth, a 501c3 nonprofit. Village Earth was founded in 1993 with a mission of connecting communities to the resources that promote their empowerment and self-determination. So it's an international, it works with communities internationally, but Village Earth's work in the US with Native communities specifically led to the founding of the Native Lands Advocacy Project, or NLAP, in 2019, specifically with an aim or a focus on providing data access, because tribes need relevant and accessible data to inform their decision-making and their planning for the future. So with the founding of NLAP was the creation of the Native Land Information System. That's our website, nativeland.info. And this is a repository of public data resources for Native communities. So if you want to go to the next slide, just a little bit more info about the NLIS. We have over 120 free public resources, and they kind of fall into these topic silos of agriculture and rangeland management, climate adaptation and mitigation, and land tenure and historical documentation. And maybe silo actually isn't the best word, because there is a lot of overlap between these topics, as we know, but we have resources like maps, dashboards, blog posts, story maps, and we're doing more video content. We know that's really useful to people. I like to emphasize those two words, free and public. We don't charge. We always get asked if we have like a fee system or a subscription. We love public support if you want to offer support, but we don't charge for access to our resources. And we also don't publish private tribal data. We're really involved in conversations about Indigenous data sovereignty. What we do is we take public data sets that are produced at the federal level, or maybe by research institutions that would be useful to tribes, but in their existing formats are not accessible. They don't take tribal geographies into account. So we take that public data, we process it for tribal geographies, and there's often a lot of decision making that goes into that, and how to do that in a way that best represents tribal priorities and meets tribal needs. But Yeah, so that's information about our platform. If you want to go to the next slide, we are talking today specifically about this tool, Agriculture on Native Lands. This is from the USDA Census of Agriculture. It's a lot at first glance if you're not familiar with it. We're going to walk through each tab of this dashboard soon. But first, we're just going to give some information about the data set itself. So I'll pass to Ode to do that.
Sure, and you might or might not be familiar with this data sets particularly, but so it's basically coming from NASS, the National Agricultural Statistics Service, and it completes the Census of Agriculture every 5 years. But prior to 1997, each reservation was counted as a single farm, the census data collection, and so it really made it difficult for tribes to analyze agricultural data, agricultural activities on their lands. And not only did it obscure the existing disparities between native and non-native agricultural producers on reservation, but really made it hard to have any information that was useful for planning purposes. Because data is not neutral, and so the methods that we use and that the feds use reflect the assumptions that they have about the lands. And so the assumption about native lands were that there were homogeneous groups within and in between, and they didn't really care about tribal politics. That was often and still oftentimes treated as like a single issue, when in fact what we're talking about is a one-on-one relationship with each single nation, which specific laws, cultural languages, etc. And so it really requires at the feds level a proactive change of data collection methods, and also for the greater public to really get to know these issues and challenge these historical assumptions, to make data more accessible. So that's really where we needed to come in. A little bit about the way that this data has been published. So the USDA, the Census of Agriculture for American Indian Reservation, has only been available since 2002. Before that, again, it was represented a single farm. And so in 2002, there were only 19 reservations represented in that data set. And in 2007, 73 reservations, and then 76 in 2012, and then we're back down to 72 now. The significance and limitations of this data. Right now, it's the most complete source of data about agricultural producers and farms on American Indian reservations. There's a bunch of other data sets about, crops and crops diversity and whatnot, but really it's the most complete data set about various series of questions on producers, farms, what they produce, etc. And also some financial information. So there's a lot of information out there that's really useful to understand the trends and the challenges across Indian country, regionally or at the reservation level. The limitations of this data set is that, well, number one, it's self-reported. And so if people don't want to report their data, that data is not represented. And then agricultural operations must earn at least $1,000 to be included. So that really excludes community food production efforts. And we know that there's a lot of community food system efforts in reservation, especially small scale agriculture. So that is definitely not represented in this data set. And you have to go to other data to complement this. But there's also another major limitation of this data set is that it's representing only a limited number of reservations, 76 out of the 574 federally recognized tribes. So that's really a limitation that's major, even though it's pointing out some trends that are useful to understand for planning. And so, Emma, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, sorry, I think that said see next slide, but it was really the past one with the numbers of reservations represented. I wanted to also acknowledge that we got a question about turning on closed captioning, and I was fiddling around trying to find that, and I think that might have been something we had to set ahead of time. So I'm sorry about that, but in future webinars, we'll make sure to have those turned on. I apologize if that's an issue. When we send out the recording later, it should have captions that you can turn on if you'd like to use those. But yeah, so what you're looking at here is the census report itself. So this is what you'd see if you downloaded the PDF or if you got your hands on the physical copy. This is 2022, it's showing table 1, and you can see that the reservations are these columns, and then the rows are the different census questions, and so you would scan down the column for your data. What I've highlighted here are these kind of subsections within that, which is the total value, and then the value for farms operated by American Indians or Alaska Natives. You might notice that there's a third value missing there, which would be farms operated by non-natives. And so I just want you to keep that in mind. That's going to be relevant later. And we can go to the next slide. The National Agriculture Statistics Service, or NASS, they do produce some resources alongside the census to provide a bit more access to the data. So if you didn't want to, scan down the column for your numbers, you could use a tool like this. Although, so this is the Ag Census web map, and this is showing the data. You can filter for the different census questions, but it's showing it at the county level. So American Indian reservations, the boundaries are not represented in this map. What I've highlighted here is Buffalo, South Dakota, which is a county that is entirely within a reservation. So this data would be useful to that community, but if you're here, you probably know that for the most part, county boundaries and reservation boundaries are entirely different. And so this tool has pretty limited usefulness for tribal communities. We can go to the next slide. This is another resource. It's called the Quick Stats kind of query tool. And so you can input the information you're looking for. This does have reservations. You can see I've highlighted just every reservation that starts with a B because I wanted to see what multiple results looked like. Two things about this. The first one might be user error, but I work with the Ag Census data a lot, and I still find this tool a bit opaque. I don't think it's the most intuitive, but it does have the data. It does retrieve the data for you. One other thing to note is the years down in the bottom left. It's 2017 and 2022. So if you wanted earlier data, I wasn't able to access it here. The next slide just shows what the result of that query looks like. So it's just kind of retrieving those values for you. The next slide is, as we're talking about kind of resources NASS produces with the census, there's a change we have seen recently. We're thankful to the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, IFAI, some of our partners, for pointing this out to us. These profiles, these rankings and profiles kind of gather data along specific topics and present them in kind of an easily accessible format. And recently, these race, ethnicity, and gender profiles were removed. So these were reports that were gathering data for these demographic groups. So for example, if you wanted to look at Asian American agriculture in the US, you could download these profiles for the entire US, individual states, and individual counties. So we're talking about potentially thousands of pages of reports. And these have been removed, which is concerning to us because our organization, our project, was founded on this idea that communities need easy access to relevant data to support their planning and decision-making for the future. And this is especially relevant, of course, for tribal communities who are self-governing. So I just wanted to point that out, but we can go to the next slide. So this is the homepage of our website. I like to start right from the beginning because our website is full of a lot of resources. And if you're new to it, it can be a little daunting. So if you want to access our Census of Ag dashboard from our homepage, you would navigate to that Data Tools tab to Dashboards. The next slide just shows what that dashboard page looks like. We've highlighted the Census dashboard. You could also use the search bar to find it if you wanted. But the next slide is the dashboard itself. This is kind of the default view that you're going to see when you access the dashboard. We're on that first tab, the Data Chart Explorer. There are a number of filters you can see. So the census year, NCAI region, this is the National Congress of American Indians. So if you wanted to do, we use their regions. If you wanted to do a regional analysis, that's where you would do that. You can also filter for individual reservations. And then those last two filters are from the census itself. So the census category and the questions. So by default, it's showing this market value of ag products sold. And you probably noticed right away the big pie chart. It's kind of the most noticeable part of this page. If you remember the report screenshot we showed you with the total and the native value, what we've done is we've created a provisional calculation for the non-native value. So we're subtracting the native from the total. There's an asterisk there because in some cases values were withheld for privacy reasons. So maybe there was a total given, but not a native value given. And so we always encourage people to go check the table explorer, which we're going to show you. We're going to show you how to use that. We encourage you to go check the numbers there to see if any values were withheld that would be affecting that calculation. But for the most part, that non-native value is showing the disparity between the total and the native value. So you can see here that non-native farms, non-native producers on reservation lands are by far making the most money off of agricultural products being sold. So this is a disparity that would be a little concerning, and we could talk about why that might be for historical and policy reasons. But the next slide is going to be a video walkthrough. So actually, if you want to not play it quite yet, because what we're going to do for the next few slides is walk through each tab of the dashboard and just show ways you can use these filters to access different data. It should go without saying that there are a lot of categories and questions in the census, so we're not going to be able to address them all. The hope is really that when you leave this webinar, you understand the dashboard enough, you feel confident enough navigating it that you can go explore the data for yourself. So you can go ahead and play this video now, Marin. So again, this is that default view. We're going to leave it at 2022, but there's the years of data you can access. And this is just going to show you the list of reservations. You could select one reservation, you could select multiple if you're interested in, maybe you want to look at all the reservations in your state. So you'd be limited by which ones are represented in the census, of course, but you could do that. For this, we're going to select the Great Plains region. So we're going to take kind of a regional look at some data. And you can see that the pie chart has adjusted, the values on the right have adjusted. And there is also a scatter plot on the right where you can explore the individual data for each reservation in that region. And these are, for the market value specifically, these numbers are in the thousands. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're seeing the values themselves. All right, we're going to switch categories now. There are a number of categories, but we're going to look at farms and land in farms. Specifically, we're going to look at acres of land in farms on native lands in the Great Plains region. This is again from the 2022 census, so you could look at different years if you wanted. We're seeing about a 50-50, about 3.4 million acres of land in farms operated by native producers, about 3.9 by non-natives. But if we look at harvested croplands, we're going to see something a little different. So that number adjusts quite a bit, and we're seeing that by far non-natives are operating the most harvested croplands on these reservations in the Great Plains region. So you could use data like this to do kind of a land use analysis for your reservation or for your region to kind of inform future decision making. We can also look at farm production expenses. The first thing we're going to look at here is chemicals purchased. This is kind of interesting. We can see that non-natives are purchasing by far the most chemicals. And this aligns with what we know of native land stewardship practices. It's just kind of helpful to see actual data backing up that knowledge that we have. In a similar way, we can look at interest expense. So loan data is, of course, pretty sensitive, pretty private, but interest expense can act as kind of a proxy indicator for loans. And so we see here that non-native producers, non-native farm operators are spending the most on interest, which likely means they have more loans. And so we know that access to capital is really important for agriculture. And there's a history of that being an issue for native agriculture producers specifically. So this data can be used. We've used this data to do kind of an analysis on lending and disparities. But so that is the first tab, and I'm just going to give like 10 seconds so that if you have a question, you have a chance to jot it down in the Q&A, and then we'll move on. I know it's a lot of information, so I just want to give a breather. All right, we can go to the next slide. This is the second tab. Oh, this is the video. There we go. This is the second tab of the dashboard. It's our population tab. It's showing operators for the year of 2022. It's showing the native values. So we can see that there's a lot more native farm operators than non-native farm operators. This is showing female and male, but we'll show how to filter for that. So if you want to go to the next slide and just play the video, Marin. So we're going to look at all years of the census to do kind of a cross analysis. We're going to leave the regions and the reservations set to all, so we're getting kind of a high level view of farm operators in Indian country. And then we're going to look at female operators first. This is really kind of cool. So there's a big gap between native females that are working in agriculture and native and non-native females, sorry. And when we switch over to male operators, we're going to see that there's still more, right? Because we know that there's just numbers wise more, but the gap is a lot smaller. So what we're seeing is that proportionally, Native women are much more involved in agriculture on their reservations, which again is one of those things that I think kind of we know that Native women are very involved in the food systems and economies of their communities, but kind of interesting to see the data for it. So you could, of course, filter this for your region and for your reservation to look at the specific numbers and the specific trends, but this is just the high level view. And again, I'm going to give just a few seconds before we move to the next one. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Next one. It looks like it's just replaying the videos when you go next. The third tab is the age of producers tab. So this and the population tab are kind of our demographic explorers. This is really how you explore the actual producer data from the census. This is showing age trends. So that graph on the bottom is showing the average age of all producers. This is specifically all native producers, but you could change it to be non-native or total with that filter. And then you can see the different age bracket numbers. So if you want to go to the next slide and play the video. I think this one is pretty straightforward, but again, we're going to leave the years set to all and again, just get that high level view of these trends. So this is showing that the average age of producers is increasing. One big caveat I think that is worth making a note of here is what Ode said earlier about community food production not being represented by the census. It's really possible that young people are getting involved in community food production or gardens or mentorships or something like that that aren't necessarily represented by the census because it has that cutoff of at least $1,000 worth of profit. And so there might be programs like that happening that are getting young people into ag that aren't represented here. But overall, we are seeing that, yeah, there is the agriculture producer population is aging. And so tribes can use that to kind of support their future decision-making and programming around how to get younger people into agriculture and how to support them and provide them the resources that they need. And yeah, like I said, like previously, I'll give a few seconds before we go to the next slide. All right, let's move on. All right, this is the fourth tab of the dashboard. This is the change over time tab. Pretty self-explanatory. It's going to show trends over time. And so we can just go ahead and play the video and I'll kind of talk over it as I have been. So this can be really useful for seeing these trends over time. A lot of the previous ones we've looked at, like the first page of the dashboard is kind of, you can look at 1 year at a time. And so we're going to select the Great Plains region again, not trying to pick on the Great Plains, just it's helpful for having kind of a regional view. And then we're going to look at livestock and poultry this time. There's also a crop section where you can look at like crop production on your reservation or in your region. This is the livestock and poultry. So we're going to look at the beef cows first. And you can see it's breaking down the change over time by native farms, non-native farms, and then those totals. One thing to note here is, of course, that especially when you're doing a regional view or looking at all reservations, this data is going to be affected by the number of reservations represented in the census. So if you're just looking at one reservation's data, it's going to show you those trends. But if you're looking at like a whole region and, maybe 1 year a certain number of reservations were represented and another year a different number were represented, the data is going to be affected by that. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm just exploring the change here with there was bison before this, and now this is the cattle and calves inventory. Yeah, so we'll give a few seconds before moving on to the next one. All right, we can move on. All right, this is the fifth tab of the dashboard, but the final one we're gonna talk about here because that last one is informational. So we encourage you to go look at it, the About the Data tab, but we've given you a lot of that information here already. So the last tab we'll look at here is the raw data table. And this is really, we try to build these really interactive data visualizations, the pie charts, the graphs, the tables. You can screenshot them, you can download them, you can use them in your own reports, really just helping visualize the numbers. But at the end of the day, you might just need to look at the numbers. So that we try to have the data table in all of our tools so that people can explore the data directly. So there's all these filters. There's a lot of ways you can use this table. And so we're just going to demo a few. If you want to go to the next slide and play the video. So this is the default view again. It's going to show that market value of ag products sold. And we're going to select all the years just so you can see what that looks like. So this is the same data we were looking at in that change over time tab, but you're just seeing it in a table form now. You're seeing the numbers directly. We're going to switch over to livestock and poultry again. And I think we're going to look at the beef cows head count again, which again is the data we were just looking at in that change over time, but it's just giving you the numbers directly by year and then that native, non-native, and total value. And we'll filter again for the Great Plains region, see these numbers adjust. We can also look, so we're going to switch it now to just 1 year. We're just going to look at the 2022 data, but we're going to look at all the livestock and poultry data. This is a lot of information in one place. So we're going to go and select the all. And it's going to load all of these, all this livestock and poultry data. So you can look at all these numbers directly and explore them. You can also use the like sort function on the columns. So this is sorting for the highest values at the top. So you can see like which livestock and poultry are most common. You can see that, cattle and calves, beef cows, bison, horses and ponies are pretty high up there for the Great Plains region. And then you can also, of course, filter for individual reservations. So we're going to look real quick at Pine Ridge specifically. And this is what you would want to check if you were looking to see if values had been withheld. This is what you would see. And you can see that for the most part, there are values in each of these columns, which means that the census wasn't withholding a native value from the total. And so if you're seeing a disparity there, then that is representative of the reality of what's happening on that reservation or in that region. You can see an example of a value that's been withheld on the goats all inventory, a little random, but there's a total given there, which is 47, but the native and non-native column are blank. So that would be what you're looking for. Thanks, Maren. Maren's running our slides for us. She's doing great. That'd be an example of what that looks like. So let's go to the next slide. We're kind of coming to the end here, and then we'll address questions. We've been calling this webinar series our Keystone data tools for native land planning, and that's because these are tools that can be built off of, that we use a lot for further analyses, that we know some of our partners use a lot for further analyses. So these are two examples of ways we've used this data for other tools. So we built the Lost Agriculture Revenue Database, which is showing the disparity in agricultural revenue from 1840 onwards. You can read about how we did this. This is one of our early projects, and really it's putting a value to what communities already experience, which is that Native peoples are not, at least in the realm of agriculture, not the primary beneficiaries of their own lands. And this is due to historic policies like allotment. But so we did that, the Lost Agriculture Revenue Database. We also analyzed the impact of allotment on native ag, and we did this by looking at the data for reservations that had been allotted versus not allotted. And we've provided two examples of our findings here, which is that there's a major difference in the agricultural outcomes for those reservations, which of course makes sense. But again, we're just putting numbers to the realities that are experienced by these communities. Our final slide is gonna go, this is our contact info. We'd love for you to follow us on social media, email us. The QR code on the left will take you to our beacons, which has a lot of information, including our newsletter sign up. The information on the right is for our next webinar in this series. We're going to be talking about land cover change. So you can scan that QR code to register for that. But I'd like to open it to Ode if she has further comments, and then we can address any questions people have.
Thanks so much, Emma. Yeah, I just would like to mention just a few takeaway points, kind of a little summary of everything great that you've explained here. But basically, the added value of what we've produced here with the Census of Ag is that whereas the USDA only publishes this data for native versus total, we've highlighted the non-native, which really allows to make comparisons and really pinpoint what's happening on native lands with agriculture. And these comparisons also allow you to dive into the data down to the question level, the reservation level, the region level, so that you can really put all these points together and realize down to the number. Okay, while native farmers hold about 50% of the land and farms, and they're the ones to use less pesticides, and they're the ones to have more women in ag, and they're the ones to raise more buffalo. They're still the ones to get basically very little of the total ag revenue, and non-natives are the ones who capture most of the ag revenue. So all of these really precise numbers are really useful if you want to build reports for your tribal council, if you want to use them for advocacy, for research. There's really a myriad of uses to be done from Keystone data sets like this one. The other thing I wanted to add was that we, as Emma mentioned, have built other stories and other complex data tools and research from this Keystone data, but also enriching and recognizing the limitations of this one data, really browse and put a lot of thoughts and research process into developing complementary tools. So yes, it's true, for instance, that this data set does not address community-based agriculture at all. But we've actually considered that in the food system transition index that we built, that really takes 20 indicators of various elements of native ag and put them into an index for further analysis. And we've built a good food access indicator, for instance, that's looking at some of these other indicators that do exist to assess community-based agriculture, for instance. And we've also produced a lot of different dashboards and data sets that complement this one. Looking at crop diversity, we've put the cropland data layer. We use a lot of satellite information to complement these tabular data sets. And so we really invite you to take the time for yourself to dive into our website and look into our story maps that really contextualize these data points and give it life and contextualize them topically or regionally. We invite you to look into the dashboards and really also feel free to send us your feedback. Let us know what you think. Let us know what's missing, what you would like to see more of. And we thank you very much for your presence today, your support, and see you at the next webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Ode, highlighting a lot of our other resources. We can address some of these questions. We also, again, please feel free to reach out to us if we haven't gotten to your question or if you have further questions. There was a question about showing the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe and a tribe in Montana. I don't think we're going to be able to show that on screen at the moment, but if you want to reach out to us, we'd be happy to get in a meeting with you and screen share and actually walk you through that data, or send you links to kind of those views. Let's see. There's some other questions. Yes, someone asked if can we use your dashboard to access these data and produce these visuals? Yeah, and that's why we're demoing it for you, because if you're unfamiliar with the dashboard layout, it can be a lot to learn at first. So we hope that demoing those different views and the filters was helpful to you. This dashboard is free and available on our website, so you can access it anytime you want and mess around with the data and search for whatever data you're interested in. And there's a download button at the bottom, so you can download the actual view that you're looking at, or you can just screenshot it. And we've had people use these visuals in their own reports. We've had tribal councils use them. We've had intertribal groups use them, which is the goal, providing that data access. Let's see. Oh, do you see the questions?
Yes, I do. I'm actually trying to answer some of them within the chat itself.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, there's a great question about food staying on reservations versus leaving it, and how absurd it is that there is so much agricultural production being done on reservations, and yet often there are food deserts, and there's a difficulty accessing food. So I think Ode answered that in the chat if you're interested.
Well, and something we may add about this is that even the labeling of food deserts is really looking at agriculture from that deficit lens, whereas a lot of the community-based agriculture is really trying to uphold that all of these really resilient initiatives that are taking place everywhere on reservation, and where reservations are really leading the way into regenerative farming and traditional agricultural practices and whatnot. And so a lot of that is really invisibilized by all of these data sets and the way that the data is captured.
There's one more question here that Ode, I'm curious if you have thoughts on, about Can you characterize broadly how representative the reservation lands are in these data versus not in these data? This is kind of a question about this would be about the NAS methodology, really, the National Agriculture Statistics Service. You can download the census document and they'll walk through kind of their methodology. We haven't, to my knowledge, done really an analysis of, you know, reservations included in the census versus not, and their land base, or the crop cover on their land. That could be an interesting thing to look at, but I don't think, to my knowledge, that we've done that.
No, yes, we have not done that to that extent, but we're looking at similar questions, though. I mean, it's definitely important to realize that most of the reservations included are the ones with the larger land base, and that the way they practice agriculture might be different. And really exploring these differences within the way that they practice agriculture is just really you can spend hours just diving into this data point by point, especially if you know Indian country and its specificities. But really, what's really interesting as well is the way that basically we can run a lot of different analyses on database like this. So for instance, you can look at the impact of allotment, whether or not reservations were allotted on agriculture. I mean, there's just so many data sets that you can add complementarily. The ones I was telling you about, even just looking at the cropland data layer and see how it compares to this data. I mean, there's just much potential for further analyses. It's kind of opening these data sets is kind of a Pandora box because it's, okay, this is what's made available, this is what's made visible. How do you represent actually the reality of native ag today, and make what's invisible salient? And it's a whole, it's a whole conversation to have. But please feel free to reach out and we can definitely look at what particularly interests you and your reservation and your particular interests.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a note. So two things about this data helping improve agriculture in the future, which is the goal. Like, I think our goal is to make the data as easily accessible to tribes as possible so that they can make decisions and plan for the future. And so we know that, we've addressed the kind of limitations of the census data, and tribes certainly have more of an on-the-ground idea of what's happening on their lands. But the idea here is just providing access to these numbers so they can use them in their reporting, in their planning, and in their research. And so there was also a note about adding data for the coming years, which, yeah, every time there's a new census released, the Ag Census, it's released every 5 years. They take a little bit of time to actually publish it. So this was the 2022 census, but it was published in 2024. And so we added that data to our existing dashboard. And so we have a lot of data sets like that we will, or a lot of data tools that as new years of the data comes out, we update them.
Anna, there's just something I wanted to add because I saw that in a question asking about if these visuals can be reproduced. So indeed, our dashboards are really easy to download. And you can see that at the bottom right of every single dashboard and every single view, there's a download button and an export button in different formats. So you can even export the entire workbook if you're familiar with Tableau, for instance, and look into the calculations themselves. But you can also just download an image, you can download a PDF. There's just all of these formats available for you for the particular view, question, reservation, etc. that you've selected.
Yeah. Yeah, Marin, actually, if you want to jump back, like just to one of those images of a dashboard, we can show that download button. And we know we're running at the end of this webinar, so I understand if people have to sign off, but just to show Just one of those earlier ones. Oh, I guess it's not included. That's my
One
bad.
of these.
Yeah, my bad. So the download button is cropped out of these images, but if you were looking on our website, you'd see there's one in the bottom toolbar. If you need help finding that, please reach out to us. There's no question too small. We want people to have access to these resources. So, okay, you can go back to the end slide. Sorry about that. But yeah, we can wrap up because we're coming to the end of our time here. We're actually 2 minutes over. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We've said it a million times. We'll say it one more. Please feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And please sign up for our future webinars. We'll be demoing tools like this for the next couple months.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye all.